typical French-Canadian family, 14 kids, poor as church mice, migrated to the United States, like 3 or 4 at a time. The kids came and then to get jobs, and basically my father was one of them. He's the youngest one, but came to the U.S. and began working in the mills, like probably 90% of the Canadians that came down. He was 30 or 31. He was old for the military. So that was around 1943, 44.
Did he ever tell you about his memories of Pearl Harbor when it was attacked? Did he have any specific memories of that?
He never really harped on it that much, other than it was a stab in the back, basically. My mother wanted to. He did not want to marry her in case he didn't come back. He didn't want her to be a widow. So they got married after he got back. To enlist rather than be drafted, he got to choose where he went. He didn't want to go through the, be drafted into the Army and do 25-mile hikes. He didn't want that at all. It's interesting, how he said he had 10 to 15 years on everybody that he was with, because they were mostly kids. Especially that war, how many kids would lie about their age to get in. And not only Americans, it was, the Japanese, because they had some, one of the instances he did tell me about is they had a POW on the ship, a Japanese kid, really, and his dog tags read 16 years old. I know he spent some time in Washington State. I remember him saying something about taking a train from New Hampshire to Washington. He did spend some time in Hawaii, but that was for recuperating, I think, when the war was going. He was Seaman Second Class, which was kind of a low rank, but his main duties was above on deck to firefighter, for one thing. He and a bunch of other fellows would be in charge of replacing, I guess, steel plates on the deck. Sometimes when the planes land, these are removable steel plates, and I'm not sure what they're there for, but they come off, or they bounce around, or they get lost into the water. They got to replace them, and these are like 100, 150-pound plates. That was a major part of his, especially firefighting. That's just brutal. When his ship was deployed, for the first time, he was on it. It was a pretty new ship. I think it was brand spanking new. Pretty much South Pacific, and there was a close call that he told me repeatedly about, and I'm not sure at what point this happened. I'm sure it's not recorded because it didn't do any damage. What happened was there was a plane that got through the radar. I don't know if it flew under or what happened, but it was a plane with a torpedo. And they were looking at it. They saw it, and they said, "Oh God, we're done," because this thing's coming broadside to the ship. And what it did is it dropped the torpedo at the wrong time. The correct way to do it is to drop it at the precise time for it to go down and then come back up and then hit the ship. They dropped it, I think it's maybe too late. It went down, went underneath the ship, and came out the other side. Who knows the damage that would have caused. He said there was anti-aircraft guns, blaring everywhere. So I'm not sure if they ended up getting it or what happened. But there were battleships around. He did say that. That was their job. The battleships were to protect the ship, the aircraft carrier, and to get to keep the planes away. And one slipped through somehow. And these guys knew how to get under the radar or do whatever to get around them. He was very adamant about, and a lot of the guys were, he said, we had no business there, being so close to Japan. They were only, I think, within 60 miles. If it wouldn't have been that close, we would have never got hit. It was a plane loaded with bombs. It was a suicide plane. Came down straight down, went through, I think he told me, at least 2 decks. And that's how his friend, they were together on deck, sharing the duties for, like I said, firefighting and replacing the plates and all that stuff. And his friend wanted to go, I guess it was getting near lunchtime or whatever it was, or time to eat anyway. Wanted to go down to the mess hall. My father was going to go down to the mess hall, first of all, to get some food. And he said, never mind, I'll go. I've got some friends down there I want to talk to. So he went. The plane hit, went through 2 decks, killed everybody in the mess hall. A lot more than that, but everybody in the mess hall especially were gone. And that was his friend. And just never saw him again. So he was spared on that one. Of course, there's mayhem everywhere and fire and flames. And he was trapped in the center. There's a structure where, I don't know which one, a cabin or whatever it's called. He was trapped in there. And there was a porthole. It was the only means of escape, and that's how he got out. He crawled out the porthole and got onto the catwalk and went to the bow of the ship. This is the only reason he always said, this is the only reason I fit through that darn thing is I was so small. He was only like 125 pounds. That's what he said. He said everything else was just too hot. He said he was by himself at that point. When they got to the bow, apparently they were ordered to throw everything overboard that didn't need to be on board because of the weight, because they were afraid they were going to sink because they were hit so bad. So they were unloading as much of stuff as they could, ammunition, everything. And then I guess not long after that is when the sister ship came to their rescue, basically, and boarded some of the men on their ship so they could, take them to safety, or the wounded or whatever. They come and get them all. A select few stayed on the ship, and it was never clear to me if he got onto the other ship or he stayed on the ship. But anyway, he ended up. Everybody ended up back stateside, because the Franklin ended up floating back on its own power. Actually, they were towed for a good part of the way apparently, and I think they did the rest of the way on their own power, which was pretty amazing, taking that kind of a hit. Yeah, quite an experience. I can't even imagine. One other thing that he repeatedly, every time he talked about it, which wasn't very often, he was so impressed and gave high praise to the airplane pilots. I mean, their skill to land an airplane basically on a moving target, because these ships are, they're huge, but they're still moving, and to take off of a moving target, off of a moving, surface. Another person, single person that he talked about a lot was the ship's chaplain. Father O'Callahan was his name. I think he was a Catholic priest. I'm not sure, but one of the famous photos is there's a wound, either wounded or dead, I don't know, a soldier laying there, and he's giving him last rites or something. The thing that he said is that he was a regular guy. Of course, being a chaplain, you're an officer. He said, he would get called to officers this or officers meetings or whatever. He said he'd never go. He'd always cater to the men on the decks, He's a regular guy. His quarters were at the bow. And being near the bow, when you're being hit by these waves or rocking the ship like this, that's where you're getting most of the motion. He'd have to about strap himself into his bunk just so he wouldn't fall out. So he ended up somehow getting towards the middle of the ship where, you don't get all that action. And he said too, being I forget which location it was though, but a lot of the guys would be sleeping next to torpedoes or bombs. Like, it is you, there's another guy, and there's a bomb. Okay. And you got to house 1,000 guys, 1,000 people, whatever it is. My mother had told me that he never spoke about it. And I think I told you the part about escaping through the porthole, he never even told her. I mean, she died and never knew about that. He only opened up to me about that in the last, 3-4 years. Every night I go up, do his medication, we play puzzles and, do all kinds of things, and sometimes just shoot the breeze. And that's when it would come out. All of a sudden, oh, wow. Then I could start asking him questions, and whatever he knew, he'd tell me or could remember. My mother and father got married, I think, in 1946. He actually got something resembling a VA loan, which was not a lot of money, today's standards, but anyway, they bought him and my mother bought a little grocery store in Lowell, Massachusetts. That's where my mother was living, because that's where my grandparents were, yeah. So they ran that for a year or two, and they sold it. He got a job, I think, in the mills, in the mills in Lowell, and then I think he got hired here in Manchester area, the Wambeck Mills and all that. That was a big part of his life. And then my mother ended up working there too. He was a loom fixer, and she worked in the winding room, I think they called it. His dream was to own and train horses, thoroughbreds. He bought his first horse, Orange Bowl, 3-year-old, 1963. He bought his first horse. And he bought her right from Ocala, Florida. I'll never forget it. Raced her for a couple of years. A lot of people don't understand the racing business, but she was claimed, meaning you put her in a category of a race with a price tag on it. She's probably got a price tag on her head. And anybody can give you, say it's $1,000. Anybody can put $1,000 in the pot and they own the horse after the race. You lose, she's gone. So that's what happened. I know, my mother was devastated. Oh my God. Went on from there. They stayed in it for another 14 years, I think. But he would train his own horses. He actually bought himself a little used piece of junk bulldozer and made himself a racetrack in the back of where my house is now, or was. And we would train the horses on that, on the off season. So when they got to the track, they were basically ready to go. That was in the 60s, yeah. So we had 2 birthdays for him, the 100th and 105th. Both were celebrated with help by the VA. Kelly Ayotte came to one of them. Mayor Gatsas came to another. We had Jean Shaheen. It's such an important part of the history. I mean, who knows where we would have been if things would have turned the other way. We'd be speaking either German or Japanese, for one thing.